On Zizek's 2019 article on retroactivity and Hegel and an answer to Todd McGowan, Zizek has always been too squishy um, to understand the Christian message where Christ says, "And I will make foes of your fellow householders." And the passage on I came not to bring peace, but with the sword. This article begins with a correct objection to Hegel, which is perfectly obvious, made by Todd McGowan, which is Hegel simply asserts the absolute, that the good has come, but he doesn't give us any solution to the situation that it hasn't come. And there's no so for Hegel apparatchiks, this is a big problem, because you spend some time studying Hegel, and then you find out Hegel has merely stated that the Pauline Christianity has come to pass and become a political truth with the dawn of Hegel's conservative liberalism. By the way, when one reads Hegel, one should realize one is not reading Hegel unless, in a serious way, unless one knows something of the historical conditions Hegel lived in. Hegel is a philosopher of history. His whole output concerns concrete history. So in the conditions Hegel was lived through, where the conditions were basically the political split was between conservative Protestants and the growing power of burgherdom, or the bourgeois, who were represented chiefly by professors such as Hegel, except Hegel was more on the side of the younger class and the conservative Protestants, who well, let's not. I was wanting to say some other things, but let's just go along with that. And the liberals were basically, who are mostly professors, were aligned with business people and lawyers and other successful investors and such. So under those conditions, then there arose a situation where a certain form of conservatism was set against a certain form of liberalism, and this was very particular. And yeah, some of the issues were philosophically is it more important that you have a competent class of people running things along the line of Plato's ship of state metaphor, so that the issue is whether the people running the state are competent technicians, rather than whether everybody's represented through the so-called right preservative of all other rights, the vote. So in this sense, Hegel said, I'll take the more conservative liberal position, which is that even though everything in Galatians 3:23, the total equality shall be recognized, and the same thing in the rights of man and the citizen. How does it say that the no Jew or Gentile, So this was then, we can see what that means by thinking about how that didn't work in the case of the Dreyfus affair. No rich or poor, so that's the Marxian reversal of Hegel to make Hegel into the Zizek is citing the 18th Brumaire, the Marxist writing that says a man makes his own history, but he doesn't make the conditions under which that history plays out. So in this sense, the economic conditions being now taken as the important thing in this particular penumbral quote-unquote advance in the Hegelian position, once it doesn't quite sort out that second issue and that second Pauline issue. And then and then the third Pauline issue is the no male or female. So we see this with the current wokeism and so forth, trying to work out this issue. So we see that this so-called in Christ, the so-called community in Christ, which Zizek points to as the Hegelian sense of what nous shows us in a vision, but which is already concretely realized amongst us in some sense. In the concrete playing out is infinite in a bad infinity. So Zizek makes this the obscene statement where he uses this phrase, which I think was from a quick Google search showed that it came from a title in Dante of Vulgare Eloquente, which means actually something like vernacular elegance, or the vernacular language, but he uses it as though it means elegance through vulgarity. So his example makes Christ metaphor with the toilet, and then he says what's happened is, even though Christ is here, so the toilet's here, this only really means that we have the statement of all these equalities, but then again and again the shit comes back into the toilet. Every time you flush it, it returns, and the shit then refers to what I was just going to, all these penumbral attempts to concretize liberalism, which Hegel gives us nothing to work with. So the basic idea is really that what Hegel thinks is the coming of agathon as the absolute, as the good, is something for nous. So remember, and I would also say this is, one can see what that means by reviewing the theological virtues that's taught in the Catholic teaching. So basically, it's as though there's a vision and a kind of intuition in the sense of seeing the future of what the truth is, but this vision is constantly thwarted, and then this is passed off as the absolute or the end. So we can see this is impossible deadlock, and then Zizek tries to introduce, to get in the direction in a gentle way, in an infidel's way, towards the Heideggerian teaching by introducing Freud and the unconscious, by trying to scramble this identity of Hegel's end, by trying to scramble this principle of identity at Hegel's end, because that principle locks one in the situation where the toilet keeps not flushing properly. It half flushes, but then the problems show again. And even if you remain in the principle of equality, you find that adumbrations are endless. Yeah. So there's just always more not just details, but more things which could be retroactively read as necessities and brought into the vision of the good. And aside from that, even the basis in a way that it doesn't show up conceptually, in a way that it only shows up for anthropological analysis of the being as it stands, even prior to the laws of reason and thought that say that everything can be stated in language in such a way that we can draw it before us. We then see all these complications, such as even that which I just said. Once you have a theory of Sprachspiel, language games, you see that this is constantly the language. If this is taken as a language game, the laws of thought in Aristotle, our first philosophy, then we can understand it to be modifiable, so that that language game can become something else that it wasn't. So that if you would go to the beginning of Sein und Zeit, to where Heidegger's speaking of that every question is already bringing us towards something that that is sought, sending us, so that for example, when Socrates says that he doesn't know, so it's as though he doesn't know das Ding an sich, he doesn't know what the thing in itself is, but nonetheless he's oriented already towards something in his way of seeking, like in the beginning of the Meno, when he's talking about arete, and he tells Meno, but Meno, I don't know at all what arete is, but nonetheless they have somehow, they know that some people have opinions about something. He might not know what arete is, but he knows that somebody down the street says that arete is this, and somebody else says that it's that. He has some content, and somehow what he has to do is work out what question he's asking. If he can work out what question he's asking, he can conceptualize it and crystallize it. So this, I think, this kind of the beginning of Heidegger's project is an answer to what Todd McGowan is bringing out in the end of Hegel's logic, when he says Hegel has produced this situation where we're stuck with the as it were, this question which has crystallized itself and explained itself, and now says that it constitutes that which shall be ever repeated, the eternal repetition of the same as time, and that we're asked not to ever realize this eternal repetition of the same, which is then agathon, or the good, which we've always been told in the tradition is dwells far off. The good dwells far off is an old Greek saying. It simply sits there as a kind of orientation, so that time has a fixed sense, but it's broken in by disturbances, as though from Dugin, for instance.